I'm Thea, I'm 32 years old, I'm a woman, and for most of my life, my family treated me like a strange and disappointing secret. My parents called me a weird computer nerd and said I'd fail anyway. My mother told her bridge club I was wasting my potential on computer games. Then, at my brother's engagement dinner, his fiancé stared at me and went pale before asking the question that made the world stop. You're Thea, the $300 CEO of Nexus, the company that just acquired us. To understand the weight of that moment, the depth of the silence that followed, you have to understand the 2 decades that led up to it. My family life was a quiet, polite battlefield, and my brother, Jeremy, had been declared the winner before I even knew we were at war. Jeremy was the golden child, the sun around which my parents, Carol and Richard, orbited. He was 2 years older, effortlessly charming, and followed a life path so traditional it could have been printed on a brochure for aspiring, successful sons. He played sports, got good grades in respectable subjects like history and literature, went to a prestigious law school, and landed a job as a corporate lawyer. He was a walking, talking checklist of their dreams. And then there was me. I wasn't a bad kid, I was just different. Where Jeremy's world was made of people, handshakes, and spoken words, mine was made of logic, circuits, and the silent, humming language of machines. My passion wasn't a secret. It was just an inconvenience they couldn't understand and didn't care to. My first computer, a clunky desktop my uncle gave me when I was 10, wasn't a tool or a toy to my parents. It was a rival for my attention. It was the box in my room that was stealing their daughter and replacing her with a nerd. Their disapproval wasn't loud or aggressive. It was worse. It was a constant, low hum of disappointment, a series of small, cutting remarks that piled up over the years until they formed a mountain. I remember my 14th birthday with perfect clarity. Jeremy had turned 16 2 months prior, and my parents had proudly presented him with the keys to a brand new, modest but respectable sedan. There were speeches about responsibility and his bright future. The air was thick with pride. For my birthday, I had asked for one thing, a subscription to a magazine about coding and robotics. It cost about $30 for the year. I opened my gift at the dinner table, a small, elegantly wrapped box. Inside was a pearl necklace. It was lovely, I suppose, but it felt like a costume. "Now you'll look like a proper young lady," my mother, Carol, had said, beaming. "You can wear it to the country club. Maybe you'll finally meet some nice people instead of staying cooped up in your room with that machine." "It's beautiful, Mom, thank you," I said, my voice quiet. "Did you see my other wish?" My father, Richard, cleared his throat, the signal for a lecture. "Thea, we're not paying for you to get more ideas about that silly computer hobby. It's a phase. Your brother is out there building a future, making connections. You're in there, playing, it's time to grow up." I never got the magazine subscription. I saved up my allowance and bought a few issues myself, hiding them under my mattress like forbidden material. The pearls sat in their box, a symbol of the daughter they wanted me to be, not the person I was. The second memory that always surfaces is from a parent-teacher conference in my junior year of high school. My computer science teacher, Mr. Davison, was a brilliant, energetic man who saw something in me. He had pulled my parents aside, his face alight with excitement. "Thea is a natural," he told them, his hands gesturing enthusiastically. "I mean, truly gifted. She's not just learning the material, she's innovating. The programs she writes have a kind of elegance I've only seen in professional developers. You have to nurture this. She could have a full scholarship to any top engineering school in the country." I stood beside them, my heart swelling with a rare and brilliant hope. This was it. This was the moment they would finally see. They would finally understand that my hobby wasn't a waste of time. My mother smiled her tight, polite, social smile. "That's very nice of you to say, Mr. Davison. We've always said Thea is creative." She said the word creative like it was a diagnosis for a mild but unfortunate illness. My father was more direct. "We appreciate the feedback," he said, shaking Mr. Davison's hand with a firmness that was meant to end the conversation. "But we want Thea to be well-rounded. We don't want her to put all her eggs in one basket, especially not one as niche as this. As we walked to the car, the hope inside me deflated like a popped balloon. Niche, I whispered, mostly to myself. He said I could get a scholarship to MIT. And do what? My mother asked, her voice laced with that familiar, weary disappointment. Sit in a dark room with a bunch of other weird computer nerds for the rest of your life? Thea, be realistic. Your brother is going to be a lawyer. He'll have a family, a beautiful home. That's a real life. That's success. They weren't just dismissing my passion, they were dismissing my entire potential future. To them, my world was small, dark, and strange, a dead end. Jeremy's was bright, expansive, and correct. The message was clear: conform to our vision of success, or be prepared to fail alone. The final nail was hammered in during Christmas dinner the year I dropped out of college. I had gone, on their insistence, to a local business school. I lasted 2 semesters. It felt like trying to breathe water. The rigid structures, the focus on theories that felt outdated, the complete lack of practical application, it was suffocating me. Meanwhile, I was spending every spare moment in my dorm room, not partying, but building an application with a friend. It was a simple piece of software for managing small business inventories, but it felt more real and important than any textbook. So I left. I took the small amount of money I had saved and poured it into my project. I moved into a tiny apartment with 2 other aspiring developers. When I told my parents, they didn't yell. They just looked at me with a profound sense of pity, as if I had just announced I was joining the circus. At Christmas dinner that year, my aunt asked me what I was up to. Before I could answer, my father let out a short, bitter laugh. "Thea's pursuing her dream," he said, the sarcasm practically dripping off the words. "She's decided to fail anyway on her own terms." Jeremy, ever the perfect son, tried to smooth it over. "Dad, come on, it's a startup. Lots of people are doing it." "And most of them fail, son," my father shot back, looking directly at me. "It's a fantasy. She had a perfectly good path at a perfectly good school, and she threw it away to play games on her computer." My mother, Carol, added the final touch. "I just don't know what I'm supposed to tell my friends," she said, sighing dramatically to her sister. "Marge's daughter just made partner at her firm. Susan's son is finishing his medical residency. And my Thea, well, she's wasting her potential on computer games." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, pushing mashed potatoes around my plate, feeling the weight of their collective judgment press down on me. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It was that they were so certain of my failure, so comfortable in their dismissal, that they announced it to anyone who would listen. In their story, I was the cautionary tale, the weird daughter who went astray. That was my role, and I was expected to play it. For the next 10 years, I did just that. I stopped trying to explain. I stopped showing up for most holidays. The space between us grew, filled with an unspoken agreement. They would celebrate Jeremy, and I would stay in my world, the strange, dark, niche world they couldn't see. They had no idea that in that darkness, I wasn't failing. I was building an empire. The phone call, when it came, felt like a summons from a world I had long since abandoned. I was in my office, a minimalist space with a glass wall overlooking the cityscape. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the cool, blue-white glow of the 3 monitors on my desk. I was deep in a logistics meeting about the final stages of the acquisition, a deal my team and I had been working on for 6 months. It was the biggest move my company, Nexus, had ever made. A $300 million acquisition of a promising but struggling software firm called Innovate. My assistant buzzed me through the intercom. "Thea, your mother is online too." I felt an immediate, familiar tightening in my stomach. A call from my mother, Carol, was never just a call. It was an event, usually a precursor to a request wrapped in a layer of guilt. "Thanks, Mark, I'll take it." I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and clicked the buttons. "Hi, Mom." "Thea, darling," she began, her voice a little too bright, a little too cheerful. It was her "I'm about to ask for something" voice. "I was just thinking about you. How are you? I'm good, Mom. Busy. How are you? Oh, busy, 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 she said vaguely. The club is planning its annual charity gala, and it's all just so much work. But that's not why I'm calling. I have wonderful news. I braced myself. What is it? Jeremy and Chloe are engaged, she announced, her voice practically bursting with pride. He proposed last weekend. It was at the Botanical Gardens, absolutely beautiful. He had a string quartet and everything. The ring is just stunning, a classic Tiffany setting. Chloe is just over the moon, we all are. That's great, Mom, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I held no ill will toward my brother. He was a product of his environment. Just as I was, please tell him I said congratulations. Oh, you can tell him yourself, dear, she chirped. That's the other part of the news. We're having a small, intimate dinner to celebrate this Saturday, just family, and of course, you have to be there. The casual of course felt like a trap. For the past 5 years, my attendance at family functions had been sporadic at best. I sent gifts for birthdays and Christmas, and I made a brief appearance every year or so, which was always enough to fuel their narrative about my strange, reclusive life for the next 12 months. An intimate family dinner sounded like a high-stakes performance I wasn't prepared to give. Oh, Saturday, I said, stalling, my eyes flicking to the calendar on my screen. It was packed. Finalizing the Innovate deal required my full attention. I don't know, Mom. It's a really busy time at work. Her voice instantly lost its cheerfulness, replaced by a cool disappointment. Thea, this is not a work event. This is your brother's engagement. It's family. Can't you put your little projects aside for one evening? Chloe is so excited to finally get to know you. Little projects. The phrase stung, even after all these years. My little project was a company that employed over 400 people and was currently valued at just under $1 billion. It was the culmination of a decade of sleepless nights, relentless work, and an unshakable belief in myself when no one else had any. To her, it would always be a little project. It's more than a project, Mom, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. It's my job, my career. Well, Jeremy manages to have a career and see his family, she retorted, the comparison as sharp and practiced as ever. He understands priorities. This is important, Thea. It would look very strange if you weren't there. What would Chloe's parents think? There it was, the real reason. It wasn't about me connecting with my brother or meeting his future wife. It was about appearances. The perfect family picture would be incomplete without the strange, misfit daughter, even if she was only there to serve as a conversational footnote. My absence would be a crack in the flawless facade they presented to the world, and that was unacceptable. I'll have to check my schedule, I said, a weak defense. Don't be difficult, Thea, she said, her tone hardening into the one she used when I was a teenager. It's one dinner. Saturday at our house, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Wear something nice. We'll see you then. She hung up before I could protest further. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the silence of my office feeling immense. The old hurt was there, a dull ache in my chest. Part of me, a small, foolish part, wanted to go just to prove them wrong, to walk in there and lay it all on the table, the success, the money, the validation I had earned for myself. But what would be the point? They wouldn't see it. They would filter it through their own lens, find a way to diminish it, or worse, try to take credit for it. We always knew you had it in you, dear. We were just pushing you to be your best self. The thought made me feel sick. The other part of me wanted to send a polite no via text and turn off my phone for the weekend. I had earned the right to protect my peace. I had built a life, a support system, and a career that was entirely separate from their judgment. Why would I willingly walk back into the lion's den? My intercom buzzed again. Thea, the team from Innovate's HR department is here for the integration planning session. Send them in, Mark, I said, shaking off the conversation with my mother. 3 people walked into my office. They were from the company we were acquiring, here to discuss how we would merge our company cultures and employee benefits. As we talked, I learned that Innovate, despite its financial troubles, had a brilliant and dedicated staff. They were passionate and a little scared about the acquisition. I spent an hour reassuring them, laying out my vision not as a corporate takeover, but as a partnership. As they were leaving, one of them, a woman named Sarah, paused at the door. "Thank you, Ms. Evans," she said. "We've been hearing rumors for weeks and everyone's been on edge. It's good to finally put a face to the name Nexus. You've put a lot of us at ease." Her words struck me. Put a face to the name. To hundreds of people at Innovate, I was a faceless CEO, a name on a press release. To my family, I was a face without a name, a person whose accomplishments were invisible. Later that evening, I was still thinking about it. I called my best friend Liam, who had been my co-founder and chief technology officer since the very beginning. He was one of the two guys I shared that first tiny apartment with. He knew my family's history intimately. "So, the prodigal daughter has been summoned," he said, after I recounted the conversation with my mother. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know," I sighed, pacing around my apartment. "It feels like a trap. I go, they make their usual comments, I feel terrible for 3 days. Nothing changes. If I don't go, I'm the villain who snubbed her brother's engagement." "Or," Liam said, his voice thoughtful, "you go and you don't play the part they've written for you. You don't have to announce anything. You don't have to prove anything. You just exist. You go as Thea, the 32-year-old woman, not Thea, the disappointing daughter. You show up, you are polite, you smile, you meet the fiancé, and you leave. You do it for you. To prove to yourself that they don't have that power over you anymore." His words resonated. Maybe he was right. Maybe the point wasn't to change their minds, but to show myself that their opinions no longer mattered. For years, I had avoided them to protect myself. Maybe it was time to face them, not out of obligation, but out of strength. "You really think I can do that?" I asked. "Thea," he said gently, "you built a billion-dollar company from nothing because your parents thought you were a nerd. You stared down venture capitalists who told you a woman couldn't lead a tech firm. You can handle a family dinner." I laughed a real, genuine laugh. "When you put it like that." "I'm just saying," he said, "go, be yourself. And if it gets bad, you can always fake a work emergency. Tell them your little project is about to implode." The decision settled in my chest, solid and calm. I was going to go, not for them, not to make a statement, but for the 14-year-old girl who just wanted a magazine subscription, for the college dropout who was told she was wasting her life. I was going to walk into that house as myself, whole and complete, and let the pieces fall where they may. The days leading up to the dinner were a strange mix of high-powered corporate strategy and deeply personal emotional preparation. By day, I was Thea Evans, CEO. I led meetings, signed off on million-dollar budgets, and finalized the intricate legal and financial details of the Innovate acquisition. The press release was scheduled to go out on Monday morning. Until then, the deal was a closely guarded secret, known only to the executive teams and the lawyers. I moved through these tasks with a practiced efficiency, my mind sharp and focused. But at night, in the quiet of my apartment, I was just Thea. The impending dinner loomed over me like a storm cloud. It dredged up memories I had carefully packed away. I found myself thinking about other family gatherings, each one a small paper cut to my sense of self-worth. There was the Thanksgiving when I was 22, my first year running the startup. I had tried to explain my business model to my Uncle Robert. As I spoke about user interfaces and server costs, I saw his eyes glaze over. My father had clapped him on the back and chuckled. "Don't worry, Robert. It's mostly just imaginary stuff, like a video game, but with more paperwork." The table laughed, and I felt myself shrink. Then there was my mother's 60th birthday party at the country club. Jeremy had given a moving, eloquent speech that had everyone dabbing their eyes. My gift had been more practical. I'd noticed my mother struggling with her old, slow laptop, so I bought her the latest, top-of-the-line model, and I spent a whole afternoon setting it up for her, transferring her files, and creating large font bookmarks for her bridge club and gardening websites. When she opened it, she gave me a strained smile. "Oh, Thea, you and your gadgets." Later, I overheard her telling a friend, "Jeremy gave me a beautiful first edition copy of my favorite book. Thea gave me a computer. She just doesn't get it. She never used the laptop. It sat in its box in her study, a monument to my inability to ever give the right gift. These memories were the ghosts that haunted my preparation for Saturday. I knew what to expect. The passive-aggressive comments about my single status, the pitying looks when they asked about my job, the endless, glowing praise for Jeremy's every minor accomplishment. I was preparing my armor, rehearsing neutral, non-committal answers in my head. How's work? It's going well, thanks. Seeing anyone special? I'm just focused on my career right now. Did you hear Jeremy just won that big case? We are so proud. That's wonderful. He must be thrilled. It was a script for survival. On Saturday afternoon, I stood in front of my walk-in closet, a space larger than my first apartment, and felt a profound sense of irony. My parents pictured me in a hoodie and jeans, subsisting on instant noodles. The reality was a wardrobe of designer business attire, elegant dresses, and shoes that cost more than their first car. But none of it felt right for this dinner. Wearing a power suit would feel like an act of aggression. Wearing something too casual would confirm their narrative of me as a slob who didn't care. I finally settled on a simple, dark teal silk blouse, tailored black trousers, and low, elegant heels. It was understated, professional, and confident. I wore my hair down, styled in simple waves. My makeup was minimal. The only piece of jewelry I wore was a thin, delicate silver bracelet. I didn't want to look like a CEO. I didn't want to look like a weird computer nerd. I just wanted to look like myself. As I was getting ready, Liam sent me a text. Good luck tonight. Remember your training, soldier. Deflect, smile, and retreat if necessary. Call me the second you leave. I smiled. Roger that, over and out. The drive to my parents' house was a journey back in time. My sleek, modern car felt out of place as I turned onto the familiar, tree-lined street of their affluent suburb. Every house was perfectly manicured, every lawn of vibrant green. It was a neighborhood built on tradition and the quiet display of conventional success. It was the world I had run away from. Pulling into their driveway behind Jeremy's gleaming BMW, I took one last, deep breath. The house looked exactly the same. The warm lights glowing in the windows, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the heavy oak front door with its polished brass knocker. For a moment, I was a teenager again, dreading coming home after school. I can do this, I told myself, gripping the steering wheel. This is not my world anymore. I am a visitor. I am an ambassador for my own life. I got out of the car and walked up the stone path. The air was cool and smelled of cut grass and blooming roses. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. It was my mother, her face arranged in a welcoming smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thea, you came," she said, her voice full of just enough surprise to be insulting. We were starting to worry. "You said 7, Mom. It's 701, I replied, stepping inside. The house smelled the same, too, a mixture of my mother's expensive perfume and whatever delicious roast was cooking in the oven. My father appeared from the living room, holding a glass of scotch. "There she is," he said, his tone neutral. He gave me a brisk, awkward side hug. "Good of you to make it." "Hi, Dad." Then Jeremy emerged, a wide, confident smile on his face. He looked happy, genuinely happy. He wrapped me in a real hug. "Thea, I'm so glad you're here." "Congratulations, Jeremy," I said warmly. "I'm really happy for you." And then I saw her. Standing slightly behind Jeremy, a glass of white wine in her hand, was a woman with intelligent eyes and a warm, slightly nervous smile. She was pretty, with dark, curly hair and a chic, professional air about her. This had to be Chloe. "Thea, this is my fiancé, Chloe," Jeremy said, his voice full of pride. He put his arm around her. "Chloe, this is my little sister, Thea." Chloe extended her hand, her smile genuine. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Thea. Jeremy has told me a lot about you." I shook her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you too, Chloe. Congratulations on the engagement." As our eyes met, I felt a strange flicker of recognition, but I couldn't place it. Had we met before? At a conference, a tech event, it was possible. The tech world, especially in our city, could be surprisingly small, but her expression gave nothing away, just polite warmth. The moment passed and I dismissed it. Come in, let's get you a drink," my mother bustled, steering me toward the living room. "So, Thea," she said, handing me a glass of wine I hadn't asked for. "Tell us, what have you been up to? Still fiddling with those websites." The script began, the performance was underway. I took a sip of my wine and smiled, the picture of practiced neutrality. "Something like that," I said. "Work is keeping me busy." The battle had just begun. The living room was exactly as I remembered it, tastefully decorated in shades of cream and beige, with family photos artfully arranged on the mantelpiece. There were dozens of pictures of Jeremy, at his graduation, on a sailboat, shaking hands with some local dignitary. There was one small, school-aged photo of me with an awkward haircut. We settled into the plush sofas, the conversation starting with the safe, predictable topics of Chloe's family, the wedding plans, and Jeremy's latest courtroom victory. My parents hung on Jeremy's every word, their faces beaming with pride as he described a complex corporate litigation case he had recently won. "Oh, that's just brilliant, son," my father said, nodding approvingly. "That's what I call a real career, tangible results." "Chloe's father is a judge, you know," my mother added, directing the comment at me as if it were a point of comparison. "They're a very well-respected family." I smiled and nodded, sipping my wine. "That's wonderful." Chloe, to her credit, seemed slightly uncomfortable with the constant praise. She deftly tried to steer the conversation in a more inclusive direct. "Ian, so Thea," she said, her intelligent eyes fixing on me. "Jeremy mentioned you're in the tech industry. That's fascinating. What area do you work in?" It was a genuine question, devoid of the condescending tone I was used to. For a moment, I was tempted to give a real answer. I could have talked about enterprise software solutions, cloud computing, the challenges of scaling a SaaS platform. But a glance at my parents' faces stopped me. My mother was already looking bored, and my father had a skeptical frown, as if he was waiting for me to start speaking in a foreign language. "I work with software development and business management systems," I said, opting for a simplified, corporate-sounding response. "Oh, how interesting," my mother said, her attention already drifting. "Richard, dear, will you check on the roast?" My father grunted and got up, clearly relieved to be excused from a conversation about technology. Jeremy chuckled, a sound that was meant to be affectionate but came off as patronizing. "Don't get my sister started on her computer stuff, Chloe. Her eyes will glaze over, and she'll start speaking in code. We can never understand a word of it." "It's not that complicated," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It is to us, dear," my mother said, patting my hand. "We're just simple, normal people." The implication was clear. I was not. The conversation moved on, and I was once again a spectator at my own family gathering. I listened to them discuss wedding venues and guest lists. I learned that Chloe and Jeremy were planning a lavish, traditional wedding at the country club the following spring. It was everything my parents could have ever wanted. As Chloe spoke about her job, I found myself listening more intently. "Things are a bit crazy at work righteously," she said with a sigh. "The company I work for, Innovate, was just acquired." My body went rigid. A cold wave washed over me. Innovate. She worked at Innovate. My mind raced, trying to process the information. The world suddenly felt very, very small. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, a skill I had honed in countless boardrooms and negotiation tables. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Oh, that's a shame," my mother said. "Is your job secure?" "I think so," Chloe said. "It's all very mysterious. The acquiring company is a big player, a firm called Nexus. No one's met the CEO yet. They're this almost mythical figure. The rumor is they're a genius who built the company from the ground up. We're all a bit terrified, to be honest. We have an all-hands meeting on Monday where the new CEO is supposed to address us." My father returned from the kitchen. Acquired? That's business, I suppose. The big fish eat the small fish. Is this nexus a good company? They're supposed to be brilliant, Chloe said, and ruthless. They dominate the market. Whoever this CEO is, they don't mess around. I could feel Jeremy looking at me. Well, that's one world I'm glad I'm not a part of, he said with a laugh. All that stress and uncertainty. I'll stick to my stable, respectable law firm, thank you very much. Right, Thea? You know all about that unstable startup life. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was a whirlwind. Chloe, my brother's fiancé, was a senior project manager at the company I had just bought. The company whose employees I had spent the last week trying to reassure. She was one of the people who was terrified of the mythical, ruthless CEO, a CEO who was currently sitting in her future in-law's living room, being pitied for her little project. The sheer, staggering irony of it all was so immense it was almost comical. My mother must have sensed my silence. "Thea, you've gone quiet," she said. "Is all this business talk boring you?" "No," I managed to say, my voice steady. "Not at all." Dinner was served in the formal dining room, the table set with the good china and silver. The roast was delicious, the conversation loud and cheerful. I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. I ate mechanically, my thoughts a million miles away. I was trying to figure out what to do. Should I say something? Pull Chloe aside? Let it play out? The potential for an explosion of epic proportions was so high that my instinct for self-preservation screamed at me to stay quiet. I was Thea, the weird computer nerd. That was my role. That was my box. Revealing the truth would shatter the entire foundation of my family's reality. I wasn't sure any of us were ready for that, so I stayed silent, a ghost at the feast, watching the clock and waiting for the moment I could politely escape. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The main course plates were cleared away, and my mother brought out a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. It was then that the conversation took its final, fateful turn. My father, pouring himself another glass of red wine, leaned back in his chai. And looked at me with an expression that was part pity, part paternal concern. "So, Thea," he began, and I knew this was the main event. This was the part of the evening I had been dreading. Now that Jeremy is settling down, starting a proper family, it makes you think, what about you? Is your little company? Is it ever going to be a stable, long-term thing? Or is it just, a stepping stone to a real job? I placed my fork down carefully, my knuckles white. "It's a real job, Dad," I said, my voice dangerously calm. Of course, dear," my mother chimed in, cutting a large slice of cake. "We know you work hard, but it's also abstract, all those numbers and codes. It's not like Jeremy's work. You can see his success. The partnership track, the beautiful office, it's solid." Jeremy, looking slightly uncomfortable for the first time, shifted in his seat. "Mom, Dad, let's not." But there was no stopping them now. They were on a roll. "We just worry, darling," my mother continued, her voice syrupy sweet. "I was talking to my bridge club the other day, and I had to be honest. I told them you were brilliant, of course, but that you were wasting your potential on computer games. That's what it looks like from the outside, you see. Wasting your potential on computer games." The phrase echoed in my head, a direct quote from the painful memory of my teenage years. The fact that she was still using it, still deploying it so casually, felt like a fresh wound. I looked across the table at Chloe. She was listening intently, her brow furrowed. Her expression wasn't one of pity, but of intense concentration, as if she were trying to solve a complex puzzle. Her gaze flickered from my mother's smiling face to my own impassive one. My father delivered the final blow. "Your mother is right," he said with an air of finality. "We supported your education, we gave you every opportunity, and you chose this strange path. I'll be honest, I told my golf buddies you'd fail anyway. Not out of malice, Thea, but out of realism. It's a tough world out there for these little internet businesses. Most of them disappear without a trace." The room was silent for a beat. The air was thick with their judgment, their certainty, their complete and utter lack of faith. I felt the familiar shame and anger rise in me, but it was accompanied by something new, a cold, detached clarity. I saw them not as my parents, but as two people who had never bothered to know their own daughter. And that's when it happened. Chloe, who had been staring at me with a look of dawning horror, slowly put her fork down. Her face had gone completely pale. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me as if she were seeing a ghost. "Thea," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your last name, it's Evans, right?" I nodded slowly, my heart starting to pound again. "Yes." "Thea Evans," she repeated, the name sounding foreign and significant on her lips. She looked from me to Jeremy, then back to me. The pieces were clicking into place in her mind, loud and fast. Nexus, the company that bought Innovate, the CEO's name is Thea Evans. My mother let out a little laugh. "Oh, what a coincidence. There's another Thea out there who's made something of herself." But Chloe wasn't laughing. She wasn't looking at my mother. She was staring directly at me, her expression a mixture of awe, shock, and utter disbelief. The entire table seemed to freeze, sensing the seismic shift that was about to occur. "No," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly as she pushed her chair back. "No, it's not a coincidence." She swallowed hard, her eyes locked on mine. The silence stretched, taut, and unbearable. My father looked annoyed, my mother confused. Jeremy just looked lost. And then Chloe asked the question. The question that detonated 2 decades of family history, the question that changed everything. You're her, aren't you?" she breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that was completely alien in this house. "You're the Thea Evans, the $300 million CEO of Nexus we just acquired." Dead silence. It was the most profound, most absolute silence I have ever experienced. It was so complete that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My father's smug expression dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. My mother's polite smile froze and then crumbled, her face going blank with shock. Jeremy looked at Chloe, then at me, then back at Chloe, his mind visibly failing to compute the information. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I didn't say "I told you so." I just held Chloe's gaze and gave a single, slow nod. The sound that my mother made was a small, strangled gasp. My father's wine glass, which he had been holding, slipped from his fingers and clattered onto his plate, splashing red wine across the white tablecloth like a bloody wound. No one moved to clean it up. 300 million, my father stammered. Aired, the words coming out as choked puffs of air. He looked at me as if he had never seen me before in his life, and in a way, he hadn't. Jeremy finally found his voice. "Chloe, what are you talking about? That's not possible. Thea, she has a little website thing, a startup." He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to confirm his version of reality, to put the world back on its axis. "Right, Thea, this is a joke." I turned my gaze from Chloe to my brother. "It's not a website, Jeremy," I said, my voice even and clear, cutting through the stunned silence. "It's a multinational software corporation, and it's not a startup anymore." The truth, stark and undeniable, hung in the air between us. The weird computer nerd, the daughter who was wasting her potential, the one who was destined to fail anyway, was the mythical, ruthless CEO they had been talking about just an hour before. The carefully constructed narrative of my family, with Jeremy as the hero and me as the disappointing footnote, had just been obliterated. And in its place was a silence so loud, it deafened us all. The silence shattered, but not into angry shouts or accusations. It fractured into a chaotic, clumsy scramble to recalibrate reality. My family, who for my entire life had moved with such certainty, suddenly looked like people trying to find their footing on the deck of a ship in a hurricane. My father was the first to speak, his voice strained and unnatural. "Well," he sputtered, fumbling to pick up his wine glass. "Well, isn't that something, a CEO? We had no idea, Thea. Why didn't you tell us?" The question was so absurd, so completely devoid of self-awareness, that I almost laughed. "Why didn't I tell you? Because you told me I was a failure. Because you mocked my dreams. Because you never once asked a single, genuine question about my life's work." Before I could answer, my mother lurched into action. Her shock morphed into a frantic, manic form of pride. "I always knew it," she exclaimed, her voice an octave too high. She rushed over to my chair and put her hands on my shoulders, her touch feeling foreign and proprietary. "I always told everyone my Thea was a genius. Didn't I, Richard? I said she was just playing her cards close to her chest. She's brilliant, my daughter, a CEO." She looked around the table, her eyes wild, as if seeking confirmation for this newly invented history. It was a stunning performance, a complete rewrite of the past 20 years executed in less than 20 seconds. The woman who, minutes ago, had been lamenting my wasted potential to her bridge club was now trying to cast herself as the wise, knowing matriarch who had secretly believed in me all along. The hypocrisy was so potent it made my head spin. Jeremy just sat there, frozen. His face was a pale mask of confusion. He looked at me, at his beaming mother, at his stammering father, and at his fiancé, who was still standing, looking mortified that she had been the one to light the fuse. My brother, the golden child, the undisputed son of our family's solar system, was completely eclipsed. For the first time in his life, he was not the center of attention in this house. The success he had worked so hard for, the success that had been the bedrock of his identity, had just been rendered insignificant by a number: $300 million. "So this Nexus company," my father said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with a new, unfamiliar light. It wasn't pride. It was something else, something more calculating. "What's the market cap on a business like that? You must have quite the stock portfolio." The whiplash was nauseating. One moment, they were dismissing my life's work as a silly hobby. The next, they were inquiring about my net worth. The speed of their reversal wasn't just shocking, it was deeply, profoundly sad. Their praise, their interest, their pride, it wasn't for me, Thea, their daughter. It was for the money. The success was a language they understood, and I was suddenly, finally, fluent. I felt Chloe's eyes on me. She looked deeply apologetic, as if she knew she had unleashed something terrible. She slowly sat back down, a silent observer to the family drama she had unwittingly ignited. I couldn't take it anymore. The air in the room was suffocating, thick with their fake enthusiasm and unspoken questions about my finances. The victory I should have been feeling, the triumphant, "I told you so" moment I had sometimes fantasized about, wasn't there. There was no joy, no satisfaction. There was just a hollow, aching emptiness in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a celebration. It was an auction, and they were finally seeing my value. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I have to go," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Go," my mother said, her face falling. "But we haven't even had cake. We need to celebrate. We need to hear all about it." "I have an early morning," I said. "Tea." He excused feeling flimsy but necessary. It was a lie. My morning was clear. I just couldn't be in that room with those people for one more second. "Thea, wait," Jeremy said, finally finding his voice. It was small, uncertain. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not the golden child, but just a confused man whose entire worldview had been upended. "I don't understand." "I know," I said softly, and I felt a pang of pity for him. This wasn't his fault. He was just as much a part of their system as I was. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could hear my mother calling after me, "Thea, wait, we can talk. Richard, say something." I grabbed my coat and purse from the hall, my hands trembling slightly. As I reached for the front door, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Chloe. "Thea," she said quietly, "I am so sorry. I had no idea. I never would have said anything if I." I turned to face her. "It's not your fault, Chloe," I said, and I meant it. It was going to come out eventually. You just pulled the bandage off. "Your family," she started, then trailed off, clearly not knowing what to say. "They're complicated," I finished for her. "Good luck on Monday at the all-hands meeting. Don't worry, I'm not as ruthless as the rumors say." A small, wry smile touched her lips. "I'm starting to think the rumors didn't even scratch the surface," she said, her respect for me palpable. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. It felt like coming up for air after being held underwater. I didn't look back. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway, leaving the house with its warm lights and its shattered illusions behind me. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I just felt an overwhelming sense of loss for a family I had never really had. The weird computer nerd had finally proven them wrong, but it turned out to be the loneliest victory of my life. The days following the dinner were a deluge. My phone, which had previously only buzzed with family-related matters on birthdays and holidays, was now lighting up constantly. There were dozens of texts. From my mother, "Darling, we need to talk. I'm so proud I could burst. Call me." Followed by, "Why aren't you answering? We're your family." From my father, "Thea, there are some investment opportunities I'd like to discuss. Important family financial planning. Call me." And from Jeremy, "Thea, I don't get it. We need to talk. Call me." Their messages were a tangled mess of feigned pride, transparent opportunism, and genuine confusion. They were trying to force a new relationship into existence, one where the past was magically erased, and I was suddenly the beloved, brilliant daughter they had always cherished. It was a fiction I had no interest in co-authoring. I ignored them for 3 days. I went to work. I led the all-hands meeting at Innovate, where I formally introduced myself as the CEO of Nexus. I saw Chloe in the audience. We made eye contact, and she gave me a small, supportive nod. I laid out my vision for the two companies, not as a conqueror, but as a partner. I talked about growth, innovation, and respect for the talent they already had. I was calm, confident, and in my element. This was my family. This was my world. The contrast between how I felt in my boardroom and how I felt at my parents' dining table was stark. After nearly a week of relentless messages, I knew I couldn't ignore them forever. They wouldn't stop. They would probably just show up at my office or my apartment. The issue wasn't resolved, it had just been exposed. If I wanted peace, real peace, I needed closure. I sent a group text to my parents and Jeremy. "Meet me at the Daily Grind coffee shop tomorrow at 10 a.m. We will talk, and then this is over." The next morning, I arrived a few minutes early and chose a small, secluded table in the back. I wanted a neutral ground, a public space where emotions would have to be kept in check. They arrived together, a united front, looking nervous and out of place. They sat down, and my mother immediately launched into her rehearsed speech. "Thea, darling, we are just so unbelievably proud," she began, reaching for my hand. I gently pulled my hand back. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "we're not going to do this." They looked taken aback. "Do what?" my father asked. "We are not going to pretend," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "We're not going to pretend that you were proud of me last week, or last year, or any time in the last 20 years. Your approval showed up on Saturday night, right after Chloe said the words $300 million. So let's not call it pride. Let's call it what it is, surprise and opportunism." My mother flinched as if I had slapped her. "That is a cruel and unfair thing to say." "Is it?" I asked, my voice still level. "For 20 years you told me I was a weirdo. You called my passion a silly hobby. You told me I was wasting my life. You, Dad," I said, looking at my father, "announced to our relatives that you were certain I would fail. You didn't do it to motivate me. You did it because you were embarrassed by me, because I didn't fit into the neat little box you wanted for a daughter." I turned to my mother. "And you told your bridge club I played computer games for a living because you couldn't be bothered to understand what I did. It was easier to paint me as a quirky failure than to admit you had a daughter who didn't care about country clubs and pearl necklaces." I finally looked at Jeremy. He was staring down at his hands, his face pale. "And you just let it happen," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I don't entirely blame you, Jeremy. You were the golden child. It was an easy role to play, but you never once stood up for me, not once." Tears were welling in my mother's eyes. We were just worried," she whispered. "We just wanted you to be happy." "You wanted me to be your version of happy," I corrected her. "You wanted me to be Jeremy, but I'm not. And my success doesn't suddenly erase the way you made me feel for my entire childhood. It doesn't fix the fact that I had to build this entire life not just without your support, but with your active disapproval. I leaned forward. Your approval, your pride? It came about 20 years too late, and it cost $300 million. It's too expensive for me. I can't afford it. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff. So what is this then? You're going to cut us off, after all we did for you. What I'm going to do, I said, feeling a sense of calm settle over me, is establish a new reality. Our relationship, from this point forward, will be one of honesty. You will not brag about my success to your friends as if you cultivated it. You will not ask me for money or business advice. You will treat me with the basic respect you failed to show me for my entire life. I took a deep breath. I will come to major holidays. I will be there for family emergencies. But the weekly phone calls, the guilt trips, the attempts to pretend we are some perfect, happy family, that's over. You don't get to hurt me and then benefit from my success. You just get to live with the knowledge that you were wrong about me. I stood up. I had said everything I needed to say. There was no anger left, just a quiet, clean finality. They sat there, stunned into silence, the truth of my words hanging in the air between us. I wish you all the best, I said. I hope you and Chloe are very happy, Jeremy. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the bright morning sun, and for the first time I felt truly free. The weight of their expectations, their disappointment, their judgment, it was gone. My success wasn't a weapon to be used against them. It was a shield that had allowed me to finally protect myself. My self-worth wasn't tied to their approval or their pride. It had been forged in late nights, in lonely apartments, in the unwavering belief in a dream that only I could see. I didn't need them to see it anymore. I had built my own world, and it was more than enough.